Why is it a fake L2? So we have to compare it to a real L2, which is Lightning. And while it's not just Spark, there's a wave of these things. There's Ark, there's BitVM based things, there's Citria, there's drive chains. There's a whole wave of these things happening in the last couple of years that are all branding themselves as L2s. And that's piggybacking off of Lightning, because Lightning kind of coined the term L2 with regards to Bitcoin. So Lightning is an emergent thing that it inherits the physics of Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin's value is that it's an open network. It has no central point of failure. There's no trust to get onto it or anything like that. You and I can transact in a Lightning channel without, you know, anybody else. Lightning is a reusable chain transaction. So if I open a channel to you, that's like me making a chain transaction to you. But with Lightning, it can be reused. You can push those sats back. If you have another one, it can go through that. So that open network, that's what makes that an L2. It's inheriting Bitcoin's properties. What fake L2s do now, because Lightning has it does have UX issues. I won't deny that. But these fake L2s trying to piggyback off those UX issues, they're not really solving these problems. They want people to see these things as having affinity with Lightning. That's why they call them an L2 in the first place. You have things, Spark is a great example. That's from a company that started out as a Lightning service provider. Spark obviously invokes the electrical theme. And these things are being integrated into Lightning wallets, which are not really wallets. They're accounts for an exchange, because these things brand themselves as Lightning wallets because they integrate swaps. So if you're using Spark, your interaction with the real L2 being Lightning is through a centralized swap service that this company provides. And that's true of Ark as well. Their monetization model is to provide swaps to Lightning. So why aren't they L2s themselves? So we can see that they have a central coordinator, which makes them a closed network. Like, you're invoking them to use this. So right off the bat, it's not an L2 because it's centralized in the closed network. The real L2 being Lightning, they have to affinity scan with that because it is the only L2. And so when you get to the UX problems that they're trying to address or claiming to address, there are things like receiving small amounts, receiving while you're offline, things of that nature. But they don't actually solve those. They're just rebranding trust, especially in the case of small amounts, because you're still trusting them if you can't afford to unilaterally exit, which is actually kind of the premise of what they call scaling too, is that you're deferring the cost. And if you defer the cost forever, people that can't afford the security of Bitcoin, you can't benefit from Bitcoin security unless you can afford to go to the chain for adjudication. The other side of that is, again, the swaps are trusted. So Spark and Ark and probably some of the others, they use a concept of state chains. The implementations all vary, but the result is the same. They do not change the underlying physics of Bitcoin. So when you're swapping from Lightning, let's say Cash App or something like that, there's 100 million plus phones out there today with some sort of Lightning wallet on them. If you count the exchanges, you count the Cash Apps, things of that nature. And if you're a seller of, you sell something on the internet for sats, and you're on one of these fake L2 wallets like a Spark, whoever's paying you is not paying you, they're paying Spark. They're paying the Ark coordinator. And then what you receive is a trusted swap. They're issuing an invoice. You're hoping that the invoice that they issue is actually going to credit you in some way. It's obviously trusted if the amount is too small for you to unilaterally exit. And when the state chain is the payer, it can collude with itself. The swap is the payer, and the coordinator is the second party. But really, there's the same party. So it's a completely trusted flow to get into these things, with the exception that In Ark's case anyway, you could make an on-chain payment to an Ark, and that should be trustless and should have the same trust guarantees as Lightning if you're doing it on chain. But if you can make it on chain, if you can afford to make that chain payment and are willing to incur that cost up front, you could have just opened a Lightning channel. And the trade-off is that if you went into the Ark, all your future receives are going to be trusted through that swap service. So, when you combine the affinity scam nature of these things, calling themselves an L2 when they're centralized, calling themselves Lightning Network when really they're just a centralized swap that's trusted. They're not solving anything. They're just rebranding trust and centralization